He walked into that hotel room thinking he was taking something back. He walked out in handcuffs, facing the rest of his life behind bars. A man who had beaten the most watched murder trial in American history, acquitted in front of 300 million people, couldn't beat a Las Vegas hotel room with 5 witnesses and a tape recorder. Vegas has a saying, "The house always wins." And on the night of September 13th, 2007, the House finally collected the verdict that changed America. October 3rd, 1995. The courtroom, the verdict, not guilty. 2 words that split America down the middle like an axe through dry wood. Half the country wept with relief. The other half went silent with disbelief. And somewhere in Los Angeles, a Goldman family sat with their grief and their fury, and nowhere to put either one. O.J. Simpson walked out of that courthouse a free man. But freedom, it turned out, had a price tag. In February 1997, a civil jury did what the criminal jury would not. They found O.J. Simpson liable for the deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. The judgment was $33.5 million. With interest accumulating over the years, that number climbed toward $40 million and kept climbing. $40 million. Let that settle for a second. That's not a fine. That's not a penalty. That's a financial sentence designed to follow a man for the rest of his life, attaching itself to every dollar he ever earned, every asset he ever touched, every transaction he ever made. And O.J. Simpson spent the next decade doing everything legally possible to make sure the Goldmans never saw a cent of it. He moved to Florida, which had extraordinarily favorable homestead exemption laws, meaning creditors couldn't touch his house no matter how large the judgment against him. He collected his NFL pension, which federal law protected from civil judgments. He played golf in Miami. He signed autographs for cash at memorabilia shows, transactions that were difficult to trace and impossible to garnish. He was untouchable. He knew it. And somewhere along the way, that knowledge curdled into something dangerous. It became arrogance. It became recklessness. It became a man who started believing his own myth. Vegas was always in the blood. Here's something the national media never gave enough attention to. O.J. Simpson loved Las Vegas, not visited occasionally, not passed through on the way to somewhere better. Loved it. The way certain people love a city that lets them be whoever they need to be that particular weekend. And O.J. Simpson needed to be somebody very specific. Through the late 90s and into the 2000s, O.J. was a fixture at the Palms Casino Resort. Palm Beach might have been his legal address, the place where Florida's homestead laws kept the Goldman family's attorneys at bay, where the trial felt far away, where nobody was tallying up what he owed. He had an entourage, always had an entourage, you know the type. Guys who laugh a half second too loud at every joke, guys who never reach for the check, guys who look at you like you're still the most dangerous running back in the history of the NFL, even when you're 60 years old, and signing autographs in a casino lounge for $50 a pop. O.J. needed those guys the way a building needs a foundation. Without them, the whole structure gets wobbly. And Vegas, to its eternal credit, or its eternal shame, depending on how you look at it, played along beautifully. That's what Vegas does. It doesn't judge. It doesn't ask what you did in 1994, or what a civil jury decided in 1997. It pours the drinks and deals the cards and keeps the lights low enough that everybody looks like a winner. But here's the distinction I want you to understand, because it matters for everything that comes later. O.J. wasn't hiding in Vegas. Hiding implies shame, implies awareness of guilt. Hiding is what a man does when he knows he's wrong. O.J. was performing in Vegas. Every table he sat at, every drink he raised, every autograph he signed with that easy smile was a performance for an audience of millions who weren't even in the room. It was O.J. Simpson telling the world that the verdict had been correct, that he had survived, that he had won. Vegas let him believe that, right up until the moment it didn't. The memorabilia and the myth. Now, we need to talk about the memorabilia, because this is where the $40 million judgment stops being a legal abstraction and starts becoming a motive. After the civil verdict in 1997, the Goldman family was awarded rights to O.J.'s memorabilia as part of the judgment. Sports collectibles, personal items, game-used equipment from his playing days. The kind of stuff that, in the early 2000s memorabilia market, could fetch serious money. signed jerseys, football helmets, personal photographs, trophies from his Heisman campaign. O.J. claimed that a significant portion of this memorabilia had been stolen from him, taken by associates, former managers, people who had drifted in and out of his orbit during the chaos of the trial years. He said the items were his, that they had been taken without his knowledge, that he had every right to recover them. Now, was that true? Maybe partially? Was it the whole story? So almost certainly not. Here's what I think was really happening, and I want you to follow this logic carefully. If O.J.'s memorabilia was sold at auction or through dealers, the Goldman family's attorneys were positioned to intercept those proceeds as partial satisfaction of the civil judgment. But if O.J. could claim that specific items had been stolen, that he was merely recovering stolen personal property rather than liquidating assets, then the transaction could potentially be framed outside the reach of the Goldman's judgment. $40 million is a powerful motivator, powerful enough to make a man do something extraordinarily stupid. Thomas Riccio and the setup enter Thomas Riccio. And I need you to pay attention here because Thomas Riccio is the most important person in this entire story that nobody ever properly introduced you to. Riccio was a memorabilia dealer. He was also, depending on who you ask, a con man, an opportunist, and possibly the architect of the single most consequential sting operation in Las Vegas history. One that he executed entirely for his own profit and amusement. Here's his background in brief. Riccio had prior felony convictions. He had operated in the gray zones of the sports collectibles market for years, the kind of ecosystem where authenticity certificates can be forged and provenance can be invented, and everyone involved knows not to ask too many questions. He was not a man of sterling reputation. He was, however, a man of extraordinary usefulness to people who needed things done quietly. Riccio claimed he got a tip that a memorabilia dealer named Alfred Beardsley had items that had once belonged to O.J. Simpson. He reached out to Simpson, told him he'd located his stolen goods, that they were at the Palace Station Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, that O.J. could come get them back. What Riccio did not tell O.J., and this is the part that should make your jaw drop, is that he had also contacted a buyer for the story beforehand. He'd arranged to sell the audio recording of whatever happened in that hotel room to a media outlet for over $10,000. Thomas Riccio brought a recording device to the Palace Station that night. He recorded everything, every word, every shout, every threat. He set O.J. Simpson up. Not for the Goldmans, not for justice, for cash. $10,000 and 15 minutes of fame. And O.J. Simpson, the man who had beaten a murder charge, walked straight into it. The night at the Palace Station, September 13th, 2007, room 1203, Palace Station Hotel and Casino, Las Vegas. The Palace Station is not the Bellagio. It's not the Venetian. It's a locals casino on Sahara Avenue, west of the Strip, the kind of place where serious gamblers go when they want to be left alone. Low ceilings, reasonable table minimums, no volcano out front. It is about as unglamorous a setting as you could choose for the final act of one of the most sensational American stories of the 20th century. O.J. arrived with 5 men. 2 of them, Clarence Stewart and Walter Alexander, were armed. O.J. later insisted he didn't know about the guns. The recordings suggest the situation was somewhat more chaotic than any prior planning could have accounted for. Here's what Riccio's tape captured. O.J. and his crew burst into the room, where Beardsley and a second dealer named Bruce Fromong were waiting. O.J. is loud, commanding, immediately taking control of the room, the way a man does when he believes completely in his own authority. "Don't let nobody out of this room," he says on the recording. Think about that sentence for a moment. That's not a man recovering personal property. That's a man running an operation. The dealers were ordered not to reach for their phones. The memorabilia, helmets, plaques, photographs, personal items, was gathered up. The dealers were told, in language that was vivid and unambiguous, that they were not to call the police. The whole thing lasted approximately 10 minutes. O.J. left room 1203 believing he had won, that he had outmaneuvered the system one more time, that he had walked into a room, taken back what was his, and walked out clean. He was wrong about almost every part of that. Fromong called the police almost immediately. Riccio sold his recording within hours. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department detectives moved with a speed that suggested they were not entirely surprised by the development. Within 24 hours, O.J. Simpson was in custody. The arrest and the irony. Now I have to stop here for just a second because I want to make sure you caught something. September 13th, 2007, go back 12 years, October 3rd, 1995. The not guilty verdict in the murder trial, September 13th, 2007 is 12 years and 10 days after that verdict. Some people called it coincidence. Some people called it cosmic justice. The Goldman family, when asked about the timing, didn't say much. They didn't have to. The date spoke for itself. Vegas is not a sentimental city. It does not traffic in symbolism or poetic justice or the long arc of the moral universe. But even Vegas couldn't have scripted that timing better if it tried. O.J. Simpson had spent 12 years telling anyone who would listen that he had been acquitted, that the system had worked, that he was free. And then, on a September night in a locals casino on Sahara Avenue, the city that never sleeps and never forgets handed his freedom back in a manila envelope marked insufficient funds. The arrest was not quiet. Las Vegas police charged O.J. Simpson with 12 counts, including criminal conspiracy, kidnapping, assault, robbery, and use of a deadly weapon. Not one or two charges, the kind a good defense attorney can dismantle in pretrial motions. 12. The bail hearing drew cameras from every network. O.J. sat in a Las Vegas courtroom, looking for the first time in public memory, genuinely afraid. The swagger was still there around the edges, the practiced smile, the composed posture. But the eyes told a different story. The trial, the sentence, the silence. The trial began in September 2008, almost exactly 1 year after the Palace Station incident, as if Vegas had decided to let the anniversary of the original verdict season properly before serving it. The prosecution's case was frankly not complicated. They had the audio recording, they had 5 witnesses in the room, they had the weapons. They had O.J.'s own words on tape issuing instructions that no reasonable jury was going to interpret as a casual property retrieval. Mass O.J.'s defense argued that he had been set up, that Riccio had manipulated him, that he genuinely believed he was recovering items that had been stolen from him, that the men with guns were acting on their own initiative without his knowledge or authorization. The jury deliberated for 13 hours. 13 hours to decide the fate of a man who had already been decided upon by half of America over a decade earlier. On October 3rd, 2008, and yes, that is the 13th anniversary of the not guilty verdict in Los Angeles. And yes, I had to read that date 3 times before I believed it myself. The jury returned its verdict. Guilty on all 12 counts, every single one. The judge was Jackie Glass. She was not a woman given to theater or extended remarks. But at sentencing in December 2008, she said something that cut through all of it. She told O.J. Simpson that this case was not about the past, that she was not there to punish him for anything other than what had happened in room 1203 of the Palace Station Hotel. But she sentenced him to a minimum of 9 years with a maximum of 33 years in a Nevada state prison. 33 years, the same number, almost to the dollar in millions, as the original civil judgment. I'm not saying the judge did that intentionally. I'm just saying that numbers have a way of telling the truth, even when nobody is trying. O.J. was 61 years old. A 33-year sentence, even at the minimum end, was designed with a specific arithmetic in mind. Fred Goldman, Ron's father, sat in that courtroom and watched. He had been watching for 13 years. He didn't cheer, he didn't weep, he just watched, and that somehow was more powerful than either. What Vegas knew that Ella didn't. Here's what I want to leave you with. Because this story is easy to reduce to punchlines and irony and the satisfying narrative of a man who finally got what was coming to him. And I understand the appeal of that story. I really do. But the deeper story is about Las Vegas itself, about what this city is and what it does to people who misunderstand it. Los Angeles let O.J. Simpson believe he was bigger than the system. The criminal trial became a referendum on race and policing and the machinery of American justice. And in that chaos, the specific question of what happened on Bundy Drive got swallowed whole. Las Vegas doesn't do referendums. Las Vegas doesn't do context or nuance or the weight of historical grievance. Las Vegas does transactions. You come in, you play the game, you pay what you owe, or the house collects it another way. OJ came to Vegas thinking it was the same game he had always played. Charm the room, control the narrative, walk out ahead. He had done it in courtrooms. He had done it in civil depositions, He had done it at memorabilia shows in Florida, where people paid him for autographs, while Fred Goldman's attorneys watched helplessly from the sidelines. But room 1-2. 03 was not a courtroom. Thomas Riccio was not a defense attorney. And a tape recorder sitting in a hotel room doesn't care about reasonable doubt. The $40 million followed O.J. Simpson into that room as surely as the men with guns did. It was in every decision he made that night. The desperate logic of a man who had been financially sentenced to death and was willing to do something reckless to claw back some piece of what the judgment had cost him. He died on April 10th, 2024 in Las Vegas, prostate cancer. He was 76 years old. The Goldman family judgment remained largely unsatisfied. The house collected what it could. The rest, as they say in Vegas, stayed on the table. Some debts don't get paid in cash. Some debts get paid in years. And some debts, the ones that follow you from Los Angeles to Florida to a hotel room on Sahara Avenue, get paid in both. Vegas knew what Los Angeles couldn't admit, that the game wasn't over, that the bill was still open, that eventually every man sits down at a table where his luck finally runs out. O.J. Simpson sat down at that table on September 13th, 2007, and the house, as it always does, won. That was the story of O.J. Simpson's final Vegas night. The $40 million ghost that walked into the Palace Station and never walked back out. Which part of this story hit you hardest? Tell me in the comments, and if you love the real history behind the neon, the deals, the debts, and the moments Vegas never forgets. Hit subscribe, because every legend has a story, and Vegas never forgets.